5 seconds. The time for convening has arrived, so we will start this evening's series of meetings, starting with our work session. We have a couple of items on the work session, starting with the naming and branding of the Sandy Springs Trail System. Mr. Perry. Yeah, let's get the mic on. Not yet.
There we go. That sounds
There
right.
you go. You got it.
There we go. Y'all doing okay?
Great.
Awesome. I guess I'm driving. Council, these are just some photographs that were taken probably within the last week. They kind of show you some of the progress along the boardwalk. That's on 2A. The boardwalk, you see, it's kind of jagged. They will come in and straighten those up, and then I believe there's a concrete allayment on top of those, and that's going all the way around Orkin Lake. Here's some of the concrete work that's been done. Again, these are a little bit old, so some of these numbers are probably not completely accurate. These numbers are lower than actual poured. But 225 feet of ash car, that's the wall, and about 100 feet of pervious to light concrete, and 800 feet or so of curb and gutter. Most of this is along Cimarron Parkway. A little bit about our naming process is, as you recall, we've briefed you before. We published a short video on the city's website asking for people to give us their ideas. And we were lucky that we had 41 folks who actually gave us some ideas, and they were all good ones. And we had 91 of them. Again, 41 people responded. There were 91 unique name suggestions. Staff took these, and we use your goal, that being to come up with something short, something that's easy to remember, something recognizable, something that would represent Sandy Springs, something that would be the overarching name of the trail system, not each individual trail. You know, on Trail 2 alone, we have, 5 segments of that. So, again, one overarching trail system name, and then we'll come back to you at the appropriate time and name the individual trail segments based on some of their geographic features and location and environmental concerns and those type of things. So the name that our committee came up with was Springway. And, it's a look at looking at incredible recreation amenity for the entire city. Here's some of the branding that we put together with Andrew and his team. They've put these together. You can see and my glasses aren't even good enough for me to even read those subtext, guys. I'm so sorry. But it's you see the logo. It's utilized as a gateway design. The first structure you see, the larger horizontal feature is the vertical. I'm sorry. The vertical structure there is the monument sign for each of the trails. It'll have its individual trail name on the top. Followed by the overarching greenway, which is the Springway. And you can see how that would kind of look on a trail with some of the graphics that were attached there. And I would love your feedback. We just might. We'd like y'all's direction on that, and we've even discussed where you see the yellow line that separates the sides of the path, potentially paint that something colorful as well. But we'll look at the transportation folks and get their input on whether it needs to be yellow to be consistent with people's perception of traffic kind of things. But yes, sir, we'd like to consider some graphics along the path.
Well, Augusta's built a pedestrian bridge over the Savannah River called the 5th Street Bridge, and they've done something very similar to this. It looks cool. On the bridge deck.
It probably would be, but they have paint, like they use on the roadways. They have paint that's built to take that better than other stuff. But you're right, anything's going to have some wear and tear on it. I can tell you the middle lines, those things typically last 5 to 7 years, from my experience.
Any other discussion, Mr. Bauman?
Hey, Michael, I love it. Is there any place to put the words Sandy Springs GA in here?
I'm sure there is.
Maybe below. You all figure it out, but I like City Springs, but one of my regrets is that we don't use Sandy Springs GA everywhere maybe we should. So I would
Yes, sir.
just one person, but might suggest including that somewhere.
Yes, sir. This is not a final design. This is just concept, and I'm sure Andrew and his team will take it and do a little tweaking to it, and we'll bring that back to you at some point. But just to make sure you're good with this, and don't run off. I've got to get a list. Hold on one second.
So this becomes the Springway Trail system in Sandy Springs. That's the plan.
Yes, and to that point, we will add the city's logo and all that kind of stuff here as well. This was just to show you the general concept for the branding itself.
Michael, are these water drops or what are they
I
supposed
think
to be?
that's right.
So
Yes, ma'am.
that's going to be on when it's close to water or when it's.
Well, that's going to be the overarching for the whole system. I mean, even if we go to the north of town, or if we go to the Panhandle or anywhere else, some addition of that.
Okay.
But again, that's all up for discussion. It doesn't have to be.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to
Looks
discuss
good to
it.
me.
Before we left, I did want to mention we had 4 people who came up with the name Springway. All or most of these people, I'm sure, are Sandy Springs residents, and they were invited to attend. So I don't know if Holly or Laura or Debbie or Kate made it. Oh, they got one. Who have we got here? How are you, ma'am? So we got Debbie, Laura, and Katie. Holly. Anybody else? But that's one of the people where the name came from. So
Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
Thank you.
hey, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is the update from the Perimeter Community Improvement District. Ms. Hanlon.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I appreciate it. Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Ann Hanlon, and I'm the Executive Director of the Perimeter CIDs. And I'm joined with one of my teammates, Ted Reinhardt, who's our Program Director, and also our Design Consultant, Winston Mitchell, who's with Kimley Horn. And much like you just heard, actually, from Mike Perry, who was seeking your input on the Trailway, we wanted to do the same. We wanted to come to talk to you about a couple of the projects that the CID is already working on. We've got 2 that we're currently working on with the city, 2 more that are in the hopper and on deck for us to do next. And then this larger initiative, which I brought a few slides on. If you don't mind, I'll run through those. And so I wanted to get your feedback. This is definitely a work in progress. And we're presenting this to all the cities and the city staff, Public Works, City Manager's Office, in addition to our own board members. So this is very, very much a work in progress. So I wanted to come to get your feedback tonight. So if we can go to the next slide. A little bit of quick history, and you know this already from some of the bridge structures that you are all working on with the city that are outside of the CID. So you've already been through this process on your own. But for the structures that are in the PCID boundary, there are 10 of them along the 400 and 285 corridors that were originally anticipated to be affected by the MMIP program. So when the DOT came to see us, just like they came to see all the cities and all the communities along these 2 corridors back in 2017, and revealed to us that these mega projects were going to be happening along the top end of 285 and up and down the Georgia 400 corridor, our board of directors, they were generally very supportive of the projects, but had a lot of concern about the way that these would look and the aesthetic of them and how that was going to affect the way that, the experience, the consumer experience as people are coming into and out of the perimeter market, especially given the fact that we're all sort of suffering from construction fatigue out at 285 and 400, and the way that it looks is very, very important. So we identified 10 structures that you can see on this slide. 7 of them are in the city of Sandy Springs. 3 of them are in the city of Dunwoody. Actually, none of them are technically in the city of Brookhaven, although we will be briefing the city of Brookhaven also, because the goal is to have a collaborative process that we can all be on the same page about what we would like to do to these bridges. If you can go to the next slide, please. So quickly, we identified among these 10 structures, we worked with the design consultant to identify these with 3 different levels of enhancement, with basically the level 1 being like a primary location. And if you can just sort of think about small, medium, and large, level 1 just getting the most basic treatment, the most basic level of investment, level 2 being a little bit better, and then level 3 being the big time investment, where we think those are gateways into the community and where we could maybe put a little bit more money into those to make them look better. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. And I'd be happy to take any questions, so please feel free to interrupt me. A little bit about where we even came up with some of these designs. And again, this is we genuinely want your feedback. This is a work in progress. But where some of these initial concepts were originally pulled from is the architecture of the perimeter market. You can see, of course, the iconic King and Queen building at Concourse that is in Sandy Springs. The State Farm complex, which is at Park Center in Dunwoody. All of those are sort of pulling from some of the same modern elements with, glass and angles. And so we wanted to come up with something that was a little more contemporary looking to reflect the architecture that's already in the CID area. Okay, if we'll go to the next slide, please. So what the consultant team has come up with, and happy to take questions on this. I may even pull up Ted or Winston to help me with some of these specifics. Because there are 10 different structures, and each one of those structures is complicated in its own way. Some of them are overpasses, some of them are underpasses, some of them will stay overpasses, some of them will have managed lane ramps built up to them. That is also a work in progress. But we wanted to come up with what we've called a kit of parts, just of different design elements that hopefully we can all agree on, the 3 city councils, staff, and most importantly GDOT, because they're the ultimate decider, that there can be a kit of parts that if we can all sort of, collaborate on the basic elements, then we could decide which elements get put in which location. So this is some of the kit of parts that we've come up with. You can see the parapet walls and monument structures that have lighting, trying to come up with something there's going to be sort of a consistent look and feel. Let's see if we can go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to put in here just like an example of one of the bridge structures that would be in Sandy Springs, and one of the reasons why we thought about it the way we did, we asked the consultant team to come up with, this is Hammond Drive over Georgia 400, to keep in mind what it's going to look like when the managed lane ramps are flying above, because in our communities we're affected the very most by these big mega projects, and on all of these structures, in most cases, there's going to be brand new lanes flying above you as a member of the driving public. So trying to come up with a design that helps frame the space. It's not just a traditional bridge where you could put elements on the bridge. You've got to have something that's not going to get lost in the sort of the concrete jungle out there with new structures flying above. Okay, go to the next slide, please. So this is a generic shot. This is not any particular roadway, but I just wanted to share what it could look like in the evening. Was when we had initial discussions with our board. Again, they're not married to any of this, but one element that they wanted to include was lighting. Something that could be lit for public safety reasons, but also for decorative aesthetic reasons. So that was kind of the reason for the lighting on the side and then the one in the middle. So,
To scale?
that is to scale.
Locations are about what they're supposed to be?
Yes. And then the one on the bottom, it's not on the one on the top. On the one on the bottom, you can see the express toll lanes in the photo.
Are they where they're going to eventually be?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to show this one because obviously the city has their own design package for other bridges that you're already doing. I think you've got a couple on the 400 corridor and maybe at least one on the 285 corridor. This is the one. This is Mount Vernon where it crosses over 285. And so, when we are going through this design process with you all, we want to be respectful of that. There's the look and feel established there. And whatever it is that we're proposing on the other bridges, we want there to be some level of consistency. We think it's important for the consumer experience that everything doesn't look different, that maybe, that as consumers enter the market and they enter Sandy Springs and the perimeter, there's at least a consistent look and feel. And on this one, you've got the Sandy Springs logo is on there. I did want to point out we have not included our logo on any of our structures. That was a discussion we had early on. and we did not think that that was a critical element to include our own logo. But I obviously know that this. Pardon me?
Will you include ours?
Yeah, every city has asked that already. So yeah, that's absolutely something that we're open to. Of course, it's not our decision. Ultimately, it will be the Department of Transportation's decision. But yeah, absolutely open to that. But I just wanted to point out that we have not included our own logo. We did not feel that was important.
And what's the cost to do a bridge?
So the approximate cost that we're working off of right now is about $3 million per structure. That's not a perfect estimate because we're trying to refine some of those estimates now, and they are expensive. Our own board is grappling with whether or not this is a good investment, and if maybe it is in all 10 locations, maybe it is in some of the 10, not all of the 10, and to what degree. So I'd like your feedback on that as well because it's something we're trying to work through.
I think a concern for me would be branding with the cities and kind of how that's going to come together. Because I think people know when they're moving in and out of cities, but do people really understand what is the PCID? Do they know what that is? And then the follow-on to that, to your point about the value, how is this going to drive the business to make money? Right?
Yeah, no, so to the first part of your question, we definitely agreed that including the CID's logo was not ever on the table as part of this. Because, yeah, I think that with the cities, each of the cities has their own, marketing and branding that's important, but for us, we did not feel like that was at the same level. But I'm glad you asked the second question because, since we originally started this process, COVID has happened, which is starting to make us rethink a lot of the way that we're going to be making these investments. And so it's a good question, if these aesthetic treatments are creating a sense of place in the district, if that's going to help in terms of economic development and getting people to come back to work and to locate their business in the district and to help, your city staff as y'all are recruiting businesses. I think the idea is that creating a clean look and a consistent aesthetic would help, but that's what we're trying to work through. Okay, so the next slide, I wanted to just show you. We've met with your staff, and of course at the other cities too. This is a blended version. Again, this is totally a draft. But when we started out with our original concepts that you saw on the first slides, and then met with your design consultant and have tried to take in some of the elements that the city of Sandy Springs is already doing on some of your other bridges and other places. We're trying to move towards a blended version of that, if you will. And so this is a draft of an attempt at that, which includes some of the faux stone treatment kind of at the bottom, if you can see that, and some of the blending in some of the elements on the fence. There's sort of like a decorative leaf pattern there. Again, not final, but would like your input on how we could sort of creatively blend elements that the city would want to see with maybe some of the architecture that fits in with the CID area and to create something that's a blended version of that.
And I think the challenge is we put a lot of effort in trying to do the bridges, and somehow or the other we need to try and harmonize these and make them look, because your design is so distinctly different than our design that it kind of defeats both our efforts in trying to brand. So somehow or the other we've got to harmonize these in a way so that it doesn't look like you've gone from Sandy Springs into some other community.
Right.
When you're still in Sandy Springs. So at least the bridges in Sandy Springs, what Dunwoody and Brookhaven decide to do is, something that you'll have to clearly work out with them. But I think from our perspective, at least from mine, having something that looks pretty close to what we're already doing on the other bridges, I think is very important. Otherwise, we are both spending money and negating each other's efforts.
Right.
So somehow or the other, we've got to work that out.
Agreed. And I think that's why we want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And fortunately, actually, one of our design consultants, we have a design consultant in common too, Atkins. And so I think the goal is on both sides, is what I'm hearing, is to make these things as much in harmony as possible. Because we've even talked about at the CID in other parts of Metro Atlanta where that hasn't been done, and you've got a different look at every single exit. And so I think we absolutely want to avoid that at all costs.
And what are the purposes of all these towers? Are they just aesthetics, or is there a reason for them?
Just aesthetics. And lighting, and it does include the lighting element.
And long term, how long do these improvements typically last before they need to be spruced up? And also, what about any ongoing maintenance costs? Who bears that?
Yes, I don't know the answer to the first question, how long that it would last. But the second question is a very good one, ongoing maintenance. That's obviously something we would have to figure out. I think the CID is certainly open to that. We've made sure not to include massive landscaping features on the bridge because that is a huge added cost that I think I can probably speak for everyone. No one wants to take that on, most of all GDOT. But the lighting elements, if a pole gets hit, the light bill, all of that definitely needs to be worked out.
What's the common, maybe address this to the mayor, how is this normally done?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's normally done based on trying to figure out a memorandum of understanding that outlines who's responsible for what. That's something we've got to do. As far as how long they last, I was in Annapolis, Maryland this weekend for a family event, and I was along, and in Annapolis, they have a brick facade over the bridges that were installed probably in the late 1980s, and they have not been properly cleaned and maintained, and they've been better off without them as they are today. Mm-hmm. So I would say probably every 10 or 15 years you're going to have to do some significant cleaning and sprucing up at least. I mean, they have not done. It really looks bad coming into the city now because of lack of maintenance on those areas. So it's something you'll have to pressure wash, and you're gonna have to, and you're gonna have to do it on a regular basis. I can't tell you beyond what my own personal, just looking at one city recently this weekend, and knowing when those were installed. You've got to have a maintenance.
Let's just put that on the list of considerations. Yeah. Obviously, the more we're being asked, the more input I think we would have.
Well, these bridges would look good if they simply pressure washed them. They still look good structurally. They just are dirty.
Mayor, a couple things.
Yeah, Mr.
First off, how many more do you have? Slides?
Oh, I think there's only a couple more slides.
I was going to say, I would ask that we see the whole thing, then let's go back and talk about some of the stuff, if that's all right with everybody.
Sure thing. So if we'll go to the next slide, which is another map. This is going to include the same. There we go. Thank you. This is a map and a rough timeline. These are those 10 structures, and this is color coded a different way. This is color coded based on the actual bridges that are going to be affected by the MMIP projects. Like the DOT is going to build ramps up to them, or the DOT is going to tear them down completely. And the other shade of blue are projects that are not going to be affected by the DOT's program. And so that's also a consideration for coordination. Some of them could be done as part of the bid package, potentially. When GDOT goes to bid with their big mega projects, it could be tacked on. It could be included in the bid package. The others would need to be done independently. So there's actually 4. I think it's the lighter blue ones. Those are 4 ones that are going to be impacted by the MMIP program, and the other 6 are not. And even the one Chamblee Dunwoody, which is the one the furthest to the east, that's a total rebuild. That's actually totally outside of the CID boundary. It's a total rebuild. The DOT's planning to tear it down and rebuild it. So again, everyone is a little slightly different. Okay. And below that, you see a rough project timeline. Of course, as you know, with your own bridges and the own projects that you're doing with the department, this is the timeline we have today. That could certainly change. But the department has told us and all the communities along the corridor that any additions or changes to the bridge structures they'd like to receive by the end of the year. So
that makes
roughly,
sense.
that's the timeline that we're working on. Getting feedback from you, from the other two cities, trying to put that in a package with harmony, and eventually, at the end of this year, getting to something that we can all take to the department together.
All right, good. That it?
One more. Yeah, that's the last one, the question slide.
Okay. So I got, if I may, a couple observations. I think improving the look of the bridges, great idea. We've been talking about doing this as well, both to identify Sandy Springs and make it a little classier looking as you pull into it, okay, as opposed to the regular DOT bridges. So I think I'm on board with that concept. I'm struck by the fact that because of geography, when you come into Sandy Springs from the north, your first bridge is, what is the first bridge? I guess Roberts.
Northridge, probably?
No, it's Roberts.
Roberts and
Roberts
then
Overpass, which they're rebuilding as part of the MMIP. But that's outside your area. So one of the challenges here is we're talking about branding Sandy Springs, which is this big in this shape. You're talking about CID, which is this big. How do we commingle these cooperatively? And then, because you don't want a situation where somebody pulls into Sandy Springs, the first bridge, they see the Sandy Springs logo. The next bridge, 2 bridges down, they see the big spires, but they don't know what that means because when they pulled into Sandy Springs, they didn't see the 2 spires. So that's the conflict in my mind. Same thing coming from the west to the east. If the first bridge is New Northside Drive, Paris Fair, is that the first bridge in? Yeah. So that's another one. It's outside your area, but that's the gateway from the west coming in. So that's an unresolved conflict in my mind, okay? So that's one observation. It's interesting that the tall spires that you showed, I've seen those. They're around somewhere else. Do you know where are they used somewhere else? And maybe it's not even in this city. I've seen them before, and they're very attractive, and they give you a sense of elevation, which with the overpasses, I can see that being desired. Otherwise, the whole thing gets kind of lost. But it's also the most expensive element of all of these, I'm sure, is the spire. So one question is there a way to phase this in and do a phased approach so that we minimize the conflict between the city and the conflict's maybe not the right word, the inconsistency between PCID and Sandy Springs. So everything still looks like we're setting ourselves apart, but we're not confusing everybody when you're in Sandy Springs or when you're not in Sandy Springs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we want to avoid a mishmash of bridge designs.
Yeah.
And, if you're in Sandy Springs, you need to feel like you're in Sandy Springs, as opposed to still be in Sandy Springs and suddenly go into some area that looks totally different. And that's going to be the real challenge. Is the term I used was harmonizing these in a way that gets the consistency that I think we're going to insist on. And I don't know if you've sat down with Marty and his team, but we need to bring something together that kind of got a good idea. We like where you're going. I'm not going to speak for everybody. I like where you're going, but we got to get closer to what our design looks like to accomplish what we both aspire to accomplish.
I like
Ms.
the
Ms.
idea
Rochelle.
of the monuments is on both sides, like when you come in, like each of our entrances into Sandy Springs, and maybe do a little less if they're really expensive, and on the other bridges, so that we can maybe help if it's not if it's not part of your area, then maybe we can, hopefully we're going to be working together on this, but.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. We definitely, that's the whole reason we're here.
Yeah.
To get your feedback. And the monuments, that again, that is nothing we're married to. I think the designers, we're looking for something to frame the space, to sort of frame. You've got the big elevated lanes coming overhead, but I'm confident that we can find something that's going to be consistent among the city's design. And we heard the same thing from the city of Dunwoody. They also want there to be a sort of a consistent look and feel as you're coming from the east side across the top end.
Marty, I need to ask Marty a question. How far along are we in our design? What have we given GDOT? I mean, we voted on a design, we gave GDOT that design. what flexibility do we have at this point?
Mayor, at this point, GDOT has priced the design package that we gave them. So they've priced it. They've got a binding contract. If you're aware, both the Pitts Road and Roberts Bridge are now in construction. So the design team, the construction team is now executing two of
So
those
we're pretty
designs.
locked in.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I was afraid
As well
of.
as Mount Vernon Highway.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have had this conversation a year and a half ago.
Hang on a second, though, because you're talking about locked in. The circle that has the logo, is that what we're, I'm trying to remember what we finally
No,
agreed
it's the
on, Marty.
design, John. It's the whole package.
Yes, sir.
But
So
are
all
these
of the
monuments
elements that-
outside of, in addition to, sorry, go ahead.
All of the elements that were a part of our, can you hear me okay? I apologize.
Yeah.
All of the elements that are part of our technical package for the bridges, and that's Mount Vernon Highway, Roberts Drive, and Pitts Road, are in the process of being executed as we speak. So here with the closure of Pitts Road next
Oh, yeah,
week,
we're starting,
they'll
yeah.
begin construction of those very elements. The same a little later on this year with Mount Vernon Highway is that construction begins there. So in Roberts, not too far behind
So
there.
my guess is if we were to decide to change it right now, GDOT would say thanks, but no thanks.
I don't know that they could, I don't know that their schedule could suffer
Yeah.
the changes to the changes we're talking about at this.
So
point.
we're locked in, basically. Okay. So we got to have a conversation, Ann.
Absolutely. No, we know, Marty's well down the road with his bridges.
I
We do
had
not
hoped
want to
that we
tamper
might
with that
be able-
process.
yeah. I had hoped that maybe a conversation would allow some integration of both elements, but it may not. So we may have to be a little bit more rigid in how we approach ours. Mr. DiGiulio.
The entrance to Sandy Springs from the south is not in the PCID, and it's not in the MMIP. Is anything planned for that in your program? Is anything planned for that entrance?
So I think, Marty, that Johnson Ferry Road,
No.
No,
that
that's
further?
it's
Northwood.
Loredans, and then what's next up?
Loredans.
Well,
Yeah.
Loredans is in the city of Atlanta.
Atlanta. What's the next bridge
The
up?
first one is Northland.
Windsor Parkway.
Windsor.
Windsor.
That is, well, Marty, that is outside of the CID, so that's
I
not
know,
one we've
yeah.
looked at. I don't know,
But
Marty.
that's not included in our work because GDOT's not rebuilding that bridge right now, correct? You might as well stick around, Marty,
Yeah.
unless you really need to work out today.
Much more pleasant listening to Ann. But anyway, so it's not, the Windsor Parkway Bridge is not impacted, as you pointed out, Tippy, by the MMIP project. The southernmost reach for any of the 285 or top-end MMIP projects is the Johnson Ferry over 400 overpass.
So we wouldn't have an opportunity to affect that one until GDOT, at some point in the future, decides it will reconstruct that bridge.
Yes, sir. So Windsor Parkway, our first bridge or overpass inside the city from the south, is not impacted by
Is not impacted.
MMIP.
And the Glen Ridge Connector one's not impacted.
Yeah,
No,
that's
but I believe it was, Ann, identified within CIDs for a bridge enhancement.
Okay.
all right, thanks. Any other input?
Just so to finish up, I think this is a good idea. It's worth having some conversations.
Right.
If we're too far down that we can't incorporate these in or some fashion of these, that would be too bad, but at least it's worth talking about it.
Right.
If there's a way to do it, I'm interested in looking further at it.
Well, I think I think you've got a consensus to sit down with staff and bring us back some ideas that can move us a lot closer to what we've already invested in. All right. Thank you very much. Anything else?
I had one more slide.
Oh, okay.
This was just, these are two other projects. This is just a heads up of the two other projects that we're working on with your staff. These are not the bridges. I mentioned we've got two in progress right now that we're working on as partnerships. One is the trail project along Mount Vernon. The other is also a trail project down by the Medical Center MARTA station. But these are two of the city's T-SPLOS projects that we are in process right now, working on contracts to partner with the city 50-50 on these.
Okay.
One is along Peachtree Dunwoody, one is there along Glen Ridge. So this is just on deck
Okay.
to come. Thank you.
All right. Ann, thanks. Appreciate it. All right. We'll move forward. I would like to call this meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council to order for Tuesday, June 6, 2023. Will the clerk please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First, I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices at this time. Individuals who would like to provide public comment in a city council meeting are required to complete and submit a public comment card in advance of the meetings. Public comment cards were available online and at the chamber entrance. Those providing public comment may be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on their single chosen topic. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Rusty Paul.
Present.
Councilmember John Paulson.
Here.
Councilmember Melody Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Melissa Mueller.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Rochelle. Councilmember Tibby DiGiulio. Councilmember Andy Bauman.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, have we received any public comment cards?
Yes, we have received 3 public comment cards this evening.
All right.
All are in-house. The first is Tracy Grimm. And Ms. Grimm will be followed by Ali Tavakal.
My name is Tracy Grimm, and I am on the Bluestone Lofts Development Committee. Many of my fellow residents are here behind me in blue. The Bluestone Lofts is the longest-standing owner-occupied residential community in the heart of Sandy Springs. As such, we are a key stakeholder in the development of the city center. We formed a development committee because we thought we had missed opportunities to participate and become more involved in key decisions impacting our community. As we attended city meetings and public hearing meetings, we became increasingly more concerned and as a result formed our committee to assist and serve at the pleasure of our HOA board. We set out to learn as much as possible about the process and current realities. Our goal was to speak to each of our 6 council people with an emphasis on our own representative, Councilwoman Mueller. Prior to this very meeting, we wanted to provide an open, enthusiastic, and respectful space to learn about each of you and what you value in an ongoing development of the city center. We also wanted to share our own firsthand knowledge of this area, current stressors and benefits, and important insights in response to the city's master plan. We feel that in addition to protecting the Bluestone Lofts' own interest, we also have the greater Sandy Springs community in mind. We are pushing for thoughtful, holistic decision-making, especially with concerns to Site C, where our namesake, Sandy Springs, is located. We trust that the city will rectify the marginalized and degraded state of the park, but it is our hope that they will also recognize it for the asset and amenity it truly is. We also hope they will utilize responsible placemaking and open up the park to be enjoyed and cherished by all of Sandy Springs and our visitors. We are so heartened that we were able to accomplish this goal, in no small part because of the willingness of our council. We really enjoyed meeting each of you. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to you for taking your time to meet with us, introducing us to additional city resources, and for your continued public service. We realize there is a long road ahead of us, and that agreement might not always be immediate, but we are thankful and our spirits are buoyed that we live in a city with responsive and engaged leadership to their constituents. So from the entire Bluestone Lofts community, thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you for the very best possible vision of what the heart of Sandy Springs can be. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Grimm.
Next is Ali Tavakal, who will be followed by Jack Mashura.
Good evening.
How are y'all?
Great.
Appreciate the time today. So my name is Ali Tavakal, and I'm here to represent or speak on behalf of my father, Jabin. Dad, give a wave so you're not a statistic. Mayor Paul, city council members, and residents of Sandy Springs. Jabin, the homeowner, has a property at 369 Johnson Ferry Road. Now, it's my understanding that our attorney has had a chance to connect with the city attorney prior to this meeting, but I just wanted to go on the record and just bring up a couple points respectfully and just really communicate how we were feeling. So, as you're all well aware, there's an attempted use of eminent domain as it pertains to that property, and it is, although we have connected with the city council attorney about an hour before this meeting, I just wanted to just honestly and respectfully just bring up some of my deep concerns regarding what we view as a lack of negotiation on behalf of the city of Sandy Springs. We had submitted offers to the city of Sandy Springs. Mr. Kendrick Brown, I'm not sure if he's here today, and then we followed up twice and just had not heard back. And as I think everyone here is aware, under Georgia law, there is a statute where the city or if a municipality wants to acquire private property, you really need to go through and make sure that you're entering into good faith discussions. And I think just humbly and respectfully that a counteroffer and then 2 follow-ups that's going over a month and really having radio silence initially really isn't what we view as a good faith, and that statute's OCGA 22-1-9. So, long story short, I had much more to say, but I wanted to just use this opportunity to say we are open and ready to talk to the city of Sandy Springs. We'd love to have a fruitful discussion with everyone, but we just really want to make a point that we're here, we're available, we're ready to meet and to negotiate, and we just want to have a open, respectful discussion that can really benefit both parties.
As do we, and I know you've reached out to the city attorney tonight, so that will hopefully move things along.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate the time.
Mr. Masura.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of the Sandy Springs Conservancy. I wanted to say a few things about trails, and I'll try to keep it brief, although once I get to start talking about trails, that doesn't always happen. First off, we want to thank you for moving forward with construction of the first trail segment at Morgan Falls. I walked it today, and it's really taken shape, and it's going to be amazing. There's a lot of work going on out there in a number of places. I think it's something we're all going to enjoy and feel really great about when it opens. Likewise, the branding concept looks great. I think that should be the perfect accent to highlighting our trail system. So we're excited about that as well. We're disappointed that we won't be moving forward with construction on segment 2E in the coming budget year. The implementation committee has been working diligently to complete the plan for that segment, and it will be 90% complete within the next month. When the decision was made to proceed with the Morgan Falls Loop, we all knew it was going to be take a significant commitment to build a 5-mile loop, and a commitment over a number of years and a number of budget cycles to build four segments of that loop. It will be important to keep momentum going forward and not end up with a trail to nowhere. We've been working with property owners for over 2 years through the design process and have them on board with the plan. This includes meetings with property owners and Fulton County, Big Trees, and others, and companies as well. Delays can always increase the uncertainty that these interested parties will be in the same position when we are eventually ready to move forward with construction. We urge you to strongly consider providing funding to get construction back on track in the next budget cycle. The Conservancy stands ready to assist with another GOSIP or other grant applications. We're hopeful that the opening of segment 2A near the end of this year will give us a concrete example, pun intended, of how great this trail will be and makes it more obvious how much we need to keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will close the public comment period. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of the meeting agenda for Tuesday, June 6, 2023.
Mr. DiGiulio moves approval of the meeting agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve the meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for Tuesday, June 6, 2023.
We have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on approval of the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The consent agenda is approved. Moving to the next item, to the public hearings. Will the clerk please read the first item?
Agenda item 2023-160. This is the first public hearing on the FY 2024 budget and discussion presented by City Manager Eden Freeman.
Ms. Freeman.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This evening in your packet, we are including a copy of the budget message for the FY24 proposed budget, which was submitted to you for your review and discussion during workshop number 3 on June 23rd. I have a few slides prepared that are also published online for the public to follow along with. Included in that is the actual budget ordinance, along with the budget detail for FY24. The FY24 budget is based on the same millage rate of 4.731 mills, which is set in the city's charter and has not changed since our incorporation. The FY24 budget includes resources that will allow the city to provide a high level of public safety and general government services to the citizens and businesses of Sandy Springs. This proposed budget also provides capital funding to continue addressing a backlog of infrastructure needs. Next slide, please, Caroline. The budget process included an assessment early on that began in January of this year to determine the quality of the services that we deliver, as well as our projected operational needs. I, along with the CFO, met with the departments to assess their projected goals and to discuss the resources that they needed to meet the goals. These were also tied back to Council's adopted priorities. Next slide. And tonight we have our first public hearing. Council will not be voting on the budget tonight. Instead, you'll be hearing from the public with their input on the process, and then the vote is scheduled for June 20th. The proposed budgets for all of our operating, capital, and special revenue funds this year are all tied back to Council's adopted priorities that you see on the slide in front of you. These priorities were reviewed and validated by Council during our annual Council retreat at the end of January, and they were adopted by Council in February of 2023. Next slide, please. This slide is reflective of the same information that was presented to you during our budget workshop on May 23rd. It is also tied back to page 1 of your budget detail packet that is included, and then page 2 is the actual summary. Page 1 is the summary, page 2 is the detail. During our last budget workshop, there was a question about if we were able to discern the property tax that is generated, how much of that is from properties that are subject to homestead exemption. And unfortunately, we are not able to answer that question at this time because the chief appraiser has not finalized the tax digest for the year. That is anticipated to be finalized sometime around June 23rd, which was reported to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. As soon as we have that information, we will be sure to share that with Council. Next slide, please. Next is an overview of our general fund expenditures. Noting next to each of the departments is the page number that it ties back to in the budget detail packet that is included in your agenda materials tonight. These numbers are the same as what was presented to Council during the last budget workshop. A question had been asked about the amount that we spend on personnel and related benefits. Our FY24 general fund budget provides $65,157,857 for personnel and related benefits across all of the departments that you see here. That equates to 46% of our general fund budget. Those numbers are specifically stated in the budget message that is the first page in your packet tonight related to the budget. 26% of your general fund goes to operations and equipment, 19% for capital improvement programs, and 9% towards debt service. Next slide, please. Here you see a summary of all of our funds and the total of our all funds budget for FY24. This has been updated from our presentation in our last workshop. When we earlier reported the general fund, we had a transposition error on FY24. The total amount of the general fund, including debt service and other transfers, is $141 million. That gives us an all-funds budget this year of $1,042,441,406. That number includes over $500 million that goes back to the Public Facilities Authority Fund, because under accounting rules, we have to show the full cost of this campus along with the cost of the debt service for as long as we are paying off the debt service. It also includes proceeds from debt that was issued for the police headquarters and municipal court complex. So that number will decrease over time so that we fall back under the $1 billion mark. Next slide, please. We have also updated our capital projects funding summary to include the amounts that are proposed in the 2024 budget. That is that last item, last line that you see. This ties back to pages 40 to 41 in the FY24 one-year CIP, as well as in the budget detail, pages 42 to 44, which are the 5-year CIP that gives you the look ahead for the items that we have identified as upcoming needs, capital needs for the city. I'm always proud to point out how much the city has returned in infrastructure investments into the city, into our community since incorporation. And with this 2024 proposed budget, that number will now be $372 million that we have put back. This is separate from T-Splost. This is simply what has been invested for capital, and it's also separate from this facility. Next slide, please. That concludes the report this evening on the budget. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you.
Any questions from council? All right, then I'll open the public comment period. Madam Clerk, do we have any comment cards?
Yes, we've received one in opposition. Tachi Blad.
Ms. Blad.
Good evening. Tachi Blad, 7320 Hunters Branch Drive. I stand before you. I've listened to your budget meetings that have been online and would like to point out several things. Last Tuesday, you did call a special Public Facilities Authority meeting, at which time you appropriated funds for the public safety building, which amounted to roughly $61 million between the land and the other costs. And it's great that we have an opportunity now to discuss the general budget and receive public comment. But on the other appropriation, there was no opportunity to do that. As tax dollars are spent, it's important that the city have input from its citizens. And I think one way to do that would be to have more opportunity as the budget progresses to have input. Right now, we've got this meeting, your next meeting, and then the budget's passed. The detail is a little slim. It does say in the overage cover, or the cover letter that the city manager has, that they're focusing on dollars and wanting flexibility in the budget. But to that end, in 2021, we had over 60% in unassigned fund balances, which I see as a budget surplus, but it was indicated that basically that is money that is just not assigned to a task. And it's important that as we progress as a city, that it would be better if we poured our sidewalks at the beginning of the year and not at the end of the fiscal year. And right now, that is what we tend to do. We have these budget overages or unassigned fund balances that are used towards the general budget. And even in this budget, you've got $22 million going from your unassigned fund balance to balance this budget. So in essence, it's important that we continue to have public comment, and I appreciate this time to bring it to your attention that more is needed so that people can weigh in on these decisions that you're making. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blad. Any others? All right, we'll close the public hearing. So we'll move on to the rest of our business. Will the clerk please read the next item?
Agenda item 2023-161. This is, ABL 100648. Consideration of approval of an alcoholic beverage license application for Gracie Hospitality LLC, doing business as Baranda Restaurante at 6075 Roswell Road, Suite 200, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30328. Applicant is Costanzo Astorita for packaged wine and malt beverages, consumption on the premises, wine, malt beverages, and distilled spirits, presented by Chief Financial Officer Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and City Council. This is a new application for consumption on the premises of wine, malt, and distilled spirits, packaged beer and wine. Gracie Hospitality LLC, DBA Baranda Ristorante, 6075 Roswell Road, Suite 200, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30328. The applicant, Costanzo Astorita, has met all requirements and staff recommends approval. This is a new application in Councilwoman Mueller's district.
All right. Have we received any public comment cards?
We have not.
All right. I'll close the public hearing. You've heard the report of the Chief Financial Officer. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul,
Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve agenda item 2023-161 for the approval of alcoholic beverage license application for Gracie Hospitality LLC, doing business as Baranda Ristorante, 6075 Roswell Road, Suite 200, Sandy Springs, Georgia.
We have a motion by Ms. Mueller. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's made by Ms. Mueller, seconded by Dr. Kelly, that we approve agenda item 2023-161, approval of an alcoholic beverage license application for Gracie Hospitality, DBA Baranda Restaurante at 6075 Roswell Road. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-161, the alcoholic beverage license application for Gracie Hospitality. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Item 2023-162, this is ABL 101429. Consideration of approval of alcoholic beverage license for RWL LLC, doing business as Roswell Food Mart at 4968 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30342. Applicant is Nazim Jawani for packaged wine and malt beverages, presented by CFO Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
This is a change of ownership for packaged wine and malt beverage. RWL LLC, DBA Roswell Food Mart, 4968 Roswell Road, Northeast, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30342. The applicant, Nazim H. Jawani, has met all requirements and staff recommends approval. This is a change of ownership in Councilman Bauman's district.
All right. Have we received any public comment cards? We will close the public hearing. You've heard the report of the Chief Financial Officer. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Bauman.
Move adoption of agenda item 2023-162, request for approval of an alcoholic beverage license application for RWL LLC at 4968 Roswell Road.
A motion by Mr. Bauman. Is there a second? Second. Then moved by Mr. Bauman, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2023-162, the alcoholic beverage license application for RWL LLC, DBA Roswell Food Mart, 4968 Roswell Road. Any discussion?
I have a quick question.
Mr. Bauman.
Maybe, Ginger, are you back there? Do we know, is this the closed Citgo right now? Does anybody? It's not the closed Citgo? Okay. Okay, I was trying to look where it was. Okay, all right then. It looks like it's right there. Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-162, the approval of alcoholic beverage license application for RWL LLC. DBA is Roswell Food Mart. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved, even though he thinks he's in the wrong city. All right, clerk will read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-164. I skipped the number 163, just so you all know. This is ABL number 96454. Consideration of approval of alcohol beverage license application for SRSK2 Business LLC, doing business as Savvy Provisions at 1160 Johnson's Ferry Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30342. Applicant is Devon Patel for packaged wine and malt beverages, consumption on the premises, wine and malt beverages, presented by CFO Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
This is a new application for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverages, packaged beer, and wine. SRSK2 Business LLC, DBA Savvy Provisions, 1160 Johnson Ferry Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30342. The applicant, Devon A. Patel, has met all requirements and staff recommends approval. This is a new application. It is in Councilman DeGiulio's district.
All right, have we received any public comment cards?
We have not.
All right, we'll close the public hearing. You've heard the report of the CFO. What's the desire of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. DeGiulio.
move approval of item 2023-164, consideration of approval of an alcoholic beverage license for SRSK2 Business LLC, doing business as Solani Provisions at 1164 Johnson's Ferry Road. 1160, excuse me, Johnson's Ferry Road.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. DeGiulio. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. DeGiulio, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2023-163, the approval of an alcoholic beverage license application for SRSK2 Business LLC, DBA Savvy Provisions at 1160 Johnson Ferry Road. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-163, the alcoholic beverage license application for SRSK2. All in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
This is agenda item 2023-165. This is ABL 10097, consideration of approval of alcoholic beverage license application for Barame 2 Corporation doing business as Erewhon Organic Thai at 7537 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30350. The applicant is Karanji Thawabunta for consumption on the premises of wine, malt, and distilled spirits, presented by CFO Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
This is a new application for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, and distilled spirits alcohol license. Barame 2 Corporation, DBA Erewhon Organic Thai, 7537 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30350. The applicant, Karanjai Thawabunta, has met all requirements and staff recommends approval. This is a change of ownership application. It is in Councilwoman Rochelle's district.
All right, have we received any public comment cards? All right, we'll close the public comment period. You've heard the report of the Chief Financial Officer. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Powell.
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve agenda item 2023-165, alcoholic beverage license application for Barome 2 Corporation, Erewhon Organic Thai, 7537 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia.
I have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Wow, that was great. Unison. We'll go with Ms. Dr. Kelly. We'll do that one. All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-165, approving the alcoholic beverage license application for Barame 2 Corporation DBA as Erewhon Organic Thai at 7537 Roswell Road. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
This is agenda item 2023-166. That's ABL number 102587. Consideration of approval of alcoholic beverage license application for Parth Ventures LLC, doing business as Barrowtown at 6300 Powers Ferry Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30339. The applicant is Parth V. Patel for packaged wine, malt, and distilled spirits, presented by CFO Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
This is a new application for retail package for wine, malt, and distilled spirit. Parth Ventures LLC, DBA Barrowtown, 6300 Powers Ferry Road, Suite 500, Sandy Springs, Georgia 30339. The applicant, Parth Patel, has met all requirements and staff recommends approval. This is a new business application. It is in Councilman Bauman's district.
All right. Have we got any public comment cards? All right, we'll close the public comment. You've heard the report of the CFO. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Bauman.
I move adoption of 2023-166. Request for approval of alcoholic beverage license for beverage application for Parth Ventures LLC, DBA Barrowtown at 6300 Powers Ferry Road.
We have a motion by Mr. Bauman. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Bauman, seconded by Mr. DeGiulio, that we approve agenda item 2023-166, the alcoholic beverage license application for Parth Ventures LLC, DBA Barrowtown at 6300 Powers Ferry Road. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-166, the alcoholic beverage license application for Parth Ventures. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved. Is that over in Powers Ferry Landing? That's the old juice box?
I'm not sure which one it is, but that's what it is.
Okay, got to be. All right. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-167, this is CA 23-0001, consideration of the character area map amendment for conservation parks to City Springs at 6110 Bluestone Road, 135 Hildebrand Drive, and 51 Sandy Springs Place, presented by Planning and Zoning Manager Michelle McIntosh-Ross.
Ms. McIntosh-Ross.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. As was read into the record, this item is the character area map amendment, CA 23-0001, for the city-owned properties located at 135 Hildebrand Drive, 6110 Bluestone Road, and 51 Sandy Springs Place. The Planning Commission and staff recommends approval of the following request. Next slide. Oh, do I move it myself? Let's see. Okay. All right. So the request is to change the character area of the aforementioned properties from their current existing character area, conservation areas park, to the City Springs character area. Here are some maps. You will see the subject properties outlined in that blue. The character area map on the left shows the existing character area as conservation area parks, and the zoning map on the right shows the properties as conservation, as their zoning. Here on the aerial, you can see the Hildebrand Drive, which is the very top of the picture, with the property at 135 Hildebrand Drive, just left, and it's west of the Fleet lot that we have. Also south of that is the 6110 Bluestone Road property, which is the Heritage Hall. And southwest of that, across the street of Sandy Springs Place, is the property at 51 Sandy Springs Place, which is currently an asphalt parking lot just behind the O'Reilly's Pub. The properties not part of this request are the amphitheater at Heritage Green and the entertainment lawn, where concerts by the spring on Sundays are held. Was not part of this request, and the Sandy Springs History Museum at the William Payne House, along with the site of the actual springs. They are not on this request and intended to remain as conservation park. These are some images of what exists today on those properties that I mentioned. Okay, so these are the considerations. As you know, the city did do a comprehensive zoning rewrite in 2017 to rezone the properties in the city from the former Fulton County zoning to what it is today as our Sandy Springs zoning. Now, we believe that the characterization of these properties as conservation was an error, since the character area designation calls for undeveloped land, and these land parcels have some level of development, and they were actually historically commercial business, C1, back in the 80s, and prior to the 2017, it was office institutional back in 2008 up until 2017. So also these parcels are adjacent to and surrounded by properties that are of the City Springs character area. The request to change would reinforce the existing and planned character of the area and reinforce the intent of the comprehensive plan, the next 10. The recommendation of the Planning Commission, as I mentioned, is approval of this request. It was a unanimous vote back in April, the April 19th meeting. Also, staff recommends approval of this request, also to change these parcels from the character area of conservation area to the City Springs, and this is the request CA 23-0001. And that is my presentation.
All right. Are there any public comment cards?
Yes, we've received 3 this evening, 2 in support and 1 in opposition.
All right.
The first in support is Bruce Morris.
Mr. Warren. No, I'm sorry, Morris. My apologies.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Morris, and like Ms. Grum before me, I'm here on behalf of more than the 100 owners of Bluestone condominiums located at 6105 Bluestone Road, many of whom are here tonight. Our owners are supportive of further development surrounding us, but want to make sure that the process protects our quality of life. Ideally, before supporting the proposed amendment and future rezonings, we'd like to see the intended development project plans so that we could have a sense of what this change in character would mean. This would include a clear description of the property's use, not just its classification, as well as a traffic study analyzing its efforts. Less than ideally, we would like to have assurance that the changes in future development will respect our quality of life and specifically protect us against, number 1, overdevelopment, as we fear excessive density. Number 2, unreasonable traffic conditions. Currently, entry and exit from our Bluestone driveway is difficult, requiring police assistance when heritage events are held. Number 3, noise levels incompatible with residential living. We already suffer the nightly nuisance of music blaring from the Mandolin Restaurant Hookah Lounge from 10 o'clock at night to 2:30 in the morning, rattling our windows. The police are very, very responsive to our requests for help, but they can only do so much. The future development will impact us with the noise. Number 4, protect us from the taking of our property by eminent domain. Number 5, protect against the reduction of green space, which the change from CON to CS will do if the redevelopment of the heritage site expands the current developed footprint. We know that the Conservation Parks character area and zoning of these parcels was not an error or mistake, as has been cited as the change's impetus. It was made as a decision to preserve green space around the Sandy Spring. That green space is one of the major factors that attracted us to living at the Bluestone. A change from CON to CS is about as extreme as you could ask for, especially as it might affect the green space. That said, we support development. We'd like to see some conditions placed on any redevelopment of these parcels to limit the lot coverage and building heights and increase the required tree canopies and building setbacks to at least try and preserve the green space feel of the area. Redevelopment should enhance the broad community's access to Sandy Springs Park. We believe the council has a unique opportunity to create a park-centric environment that honors the founding of our city and protects a much-needed green space. While we know that this council can take whatever action it wishes to take, please know that we are monitoring the development and zoning process. We are organized. We are committed to being involved and staying involved. We have a vested interest and intend to protect it. Many of us are the original Sandy Springs urban pioneers, having moved to the Bluestone more than 20 years ago when there was nothing else there. What we ask for is for your respect and to protect us by including us in the planning and in the development process and considering our concerns before plans are finalized. Simply stated, we support this change, but we want today and in the future discussions a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Next, we have Michael Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Good evening. I'm Michael Smith, a longtime resident of Sandy Springs, 1998 specifically. I've been in the north, near Huntcliffe. I've been across from Mount Vernon, son Holy Innocents, and for the last 2 years a resident of Bluestone. So I'm here speaking as an immediate area resident, but really broadly as a citizen of Sandy Springs. What I'm going to mention, share my perspective, my business career. I'm a real estate investor, capital facilitator. And in that role, I have done a dozen projects similar to what Sandy Springs or City Springs Phase 2 is envisioning. So I have keen perspective on all the constituents and the motivations. So it won't surprise you that I'm pro-development. I'm quite excited about the opportunity. And so first I want to say to the council that as a longtime resident, I want to extend my thanks for the history of good decisions from the city's inception to current. Good decisions or sound decisions have gotten you to this point, evidenced by delivering City Springs, well received, control and purchase of these assets or these parcels that are now going to be your Phase 2. Extending Bluestone's grid, that was smart. All of which has set the stage for what I think is and know to be an exciting, transformative opportunity in front of you as the leadership and us as citizens. You have the opportunity, what I would say is one of the most impactful decisions in front of you, and I'll elaborate that in a moment. So my business perspective, when I read the RFP, I had great understanding of the unilateral, broad decision-making that you have as part of this process and tonight's proposed decision about a master developer. So I understand how broad your decision criteria is. I also have a true sense of a developer's mindset and the realities they must navigate to bring any development forward. Finally, must note the current economic headwinds. Mine is a capital background. I'm very aware of what your development partners or proposed partners are going to be facing, and I understand the dynamics. You're going to set the stage as a land seller as to what your motivations are. I read the RFP. There are a few things in there that are disturbing, the most of which was setting aside or the sale of critical components of what you call Site C versus looking at holistically the park as it exists today. Because the developer's plan is going to be very, very influenced by what you as the land seller put on them and the requirements. Okay. Those requirements including parking set-asides. What is that going to do? That's going to net against your land price, which your yield, because you're asking them to do things for you. It's going to increase density. Those are all things that are obvious. It's also going to push and steer a developer towards uses that are antagonistic to what you've stated are your goals and what we readily are looking for. The goals are for sale residential versus rental. If you're going to require a development group to deliver you parking, they're going to have to go higher. The density that we're concerned about, the impacts traffic that we're concerned about. The recommendation that we would like for you to consider today will have no downside to any of the various constituents. I've had the opportunity to talk in our development committee, which I'm part, to all of you and have shared what we talked about or view as a park-centric consideration of that entire parcel. So the specific recommendation is to extract Site C from this initial reward. Allow the time to consider a park-centric development, a holistic development of the parcel, and its overwhelming benefits. And by the holistic park or parcel, I'm talking about heritage, the amphitheater, the park, Williams Payne House, as well as the parcels within that block. Done so, you can truly restore and enhance the namesake spring and park. Restore the creek from its stressed environmental condition, a condition that will rise itself up, I know, with the environmentalists as you proceed. You can balance the site and deliver the world-class aspirational museum with proper access, impact, and proper density. Further enhance the legacy amphitheater and deliver a magnificent park space to the community. If you proceed as your RFP indicates and you develop these parcels individually, it'll be costly, very costly. The resulting impact will require many
Mr. Smith,
unnecessary
your time's up. I'm
concessions.
sorry. Thank you for your presentation. Who's next?
Okay, we have one in opposition. This is for Alan Panzer.
Mr. Panzer.
Good evening. Alan Panzer, 5 Braymore Drive, just a couple blocks down the road. So I'm new at this. I've been trying to figure out what's been going on with this parcel. And the more I kind of learn, the more disturbed I get. Tibby, you don't remember this, but you and I sat in your office 20 years ago when you were the manager at A.G. Edwards. And the topic of cityhood came up, and I was against it. I read books by P.J. O'Rourke, and he warned against city councils. They start small, but ultimately, before you know it, there's a $20 million city hall with the clock tower. We don't have the clock tower, but he was off by 10x. But you were really convincing, actually. You were passionate, and you actually convinced me, and I became an advocate. And I have no doubt of your intent. But what's happened, and I've been watching, and I live, like I said, about a half mile from here. And if you'd have told me then that there'd be, I think, 6 or 7 new apartment complexes in walking distance with close to 2,000 new units, I'd have thought you were crazy. But I certainly wouldn't have been for it, because what would be the point? And so when I started down this journey to figure out what was going on, because I drove around there a lot, and I see the sign, you're going to redevelop or rezone, reclassify, I don't know how the whole verbiage goes. And I started to ask, and I spoke to someone, and they said, well, it's conservation now, which made sense. It's our city namesake. It's Sandy Springs. That's Sandy Springs. If anybody wants to know where the name Sandy Springs came from, that's where you're trying to develop. And I said, okay, well, it's conservation. And they said, well, yeah, they're going to call it a mistake. What do you mean they're going to call it a mistake? Clearly, the people who created the map knew what they were doing. It wasn't a mistake. Oh, yeah, but Alan, that doesn't matter. They have to do that because they already know they want to develop it. They know exactly what they want to do. This is what I'm told. I don't know anything. And then I look online and I see that $600,000 was appropriated to design the development that supposedly wasn't going to happen because this was going to be conserved. Now, I don't know if that $600,000 was spent. Again, it was appropriated, I think, in September of last year, like 7 months ago. Maybe it's sitting in reserve. Is that a question I'm allowed to ask? Has that money been spent? Has there a design? But none of it really, again, made sense because I understood the BMW, that's where I used to fix my cars before it was taken by the city. And Tony didn't want to sell it, but you made him an offer he couldn't refuse, so he had to sell it. And now I got to Uber down to Buckhead and spend twice as much money and wait twice as long. But okay, if that was going to be developed and the house next door was going to be developed and that little parking lot was going to be developed, all right, whatever. But I would disagree, but I wouldn't be here today. It's that last hall. It's the Heritage Hall. Whoops. Oh, somebody's ringing my doorbell. I'm sorry. It never happens. But anyway, I don't need this. The reality is that hall was just redeveloped or redesigned. You spent millions of dollars, 6, 7 years ago, redoing that building? millions. And now it's not good enough to house something, a museum. I'm not really sure. I'm in favor of it, but it's a beautiful building. Atlanta Journal-Constitution calls it a top 10 destination for your wedding rehearsal. It's been written up by, and actually I guess I do need it. It's been written up in all different websites. That building, that specific building, let's see, Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 2018, they called the entire area, but particularly called out that building as one of the 9 unforgettable places to hold your wedding rehearsal in all of Atlanta. That building that you want to tear down. Explore Georgia. It's a website. Probably seen it. It says Heritage Sandy Springs Museum and Park is a nonprofit that builds community through the preservation and promotion of the historic and cultural identity of Sandy Springs. Heritage Green is the home of the original springs for which the city is named, a tier outdoor entertainment lawn, the Heritage Sandy Springs Museum at the William Payne House, and, quote, I'm quoting now, a state-of-the-art, recently renovated facility for special event rentals. Lastly, this is a huge website if you do events. It's called Event Up. It's a national website. They talk about Heritage Hall, that specific building, this way. They say completed in the fall of 2011. So I take that back. It was 12 years ago. Heritage Hall is part of a 3,000 square foot indoor facility with an on-site catering kitchen, private dressing room, and spacious outdoor veranda. The rustic elegance of Heritage Hall's decor blends seamlessly with the historic gardens and is the ideal event space year-round. So, again, I think we're all just confused. We all know it wasn't a mistake, and that's what you have to do, and I guess that's how things work in City Hall. But that particular building, I know you've got your eyes set on it, but it should be preserved. The founders of the city or whoever it was that created the character map that said this is to be conserved, they probably didn't know that City Springs was going to be as big as it is. And, you know, we all get it. Development happens. But for 4 little acres, it's not too much to ask to not build whatever it is that is in those things that are concerning the other folks that are in support of this. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? All right, we'll close the public comment period. All right, you have heard the report of the planning and zoning manager. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul,
Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve agenda item 2023-167, CA 23-0001 for the approval of a character area map amendment from Conservation Parks to City Springs at 6110 Bluestone Road, 135 Hildebrand Drive, and 51 Sandy Springs Place.
We have a motion by Ms. Mueller. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Ms. Reichel, or Shell, apologize. I'm screwing everybody's name up tonight.
It's called age.
It's something. So any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Mueller.
So I just want to say thank you to all the people who spoke tonight, especially the Bluestone team, you're organized, and I look forward to engaging with you as we move throughout this process, and really looking forward to it.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. I echo Councilman Mueller's comments that the engaged community across the street, which I met with you guys a couple weeks ago, it's better to be engaged earlier and at least try to understand and try to influence what's happening. I will say 2 things. One, this proposal that we're talking about here doesn't include the spring itself. The spring itself is in, there's a little correction here. The spring itself is on the property to the west of what we're talking about redoing. And then number 2, this isn't the end of this conversation. This is the beginning of significant additional conversations about what do we do next. This is the first step in many steps that are coming. And stay tuned. There'll be a lot of community input in Sandy Springs. There always is community input. to the point where there are times people have said to me, stop with the meetings, okay, let's go forward. Hopefully that doesn't happen here, but anyway, a clarification and also a comment that there's more coming. This is not there's more to be done with this whole site than what we're doing here. This is a first step. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-167, approval of a character area map amendment from the Conservation Parks to City Springs at 6110 Bluestone Road, 135 Hildebrand Drive, and 51 Sandy Springs Place. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-168, consideration of approval to declare a surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same. This is presented by CFO Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle, you busy tonight?
For sure. Mayor Paul and City Council, we are seeking your approval to declare certain city property as surplus. The city's police, fleet, and fire departments has property which is outside of the service date and no longer of valid use for the productivity of the business of the city. The exhibit provided lists all equipment for consideration of categorizing as surplus. The purchasing policy and code of ordinance directs our purchasing team to dispose of these items under the supervision of the city manager in the most advantageous manner. Choosing to move forward allows the purchasing team to make items available for sale, donate, or dispose. Declining the request requires us to maintain an inventory and a storage location for this property. We are seeking approval of classifying these items as surplus.
All right, you've heard the report of the Chief Financial Officer. What's the desire of council? Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2023-168, approval to declare the surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Dr. Kelly, that we approve agenda item 2023-168, the declaration of surplus properties owned by the city and directing disposal of the same. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
So if somebody in the audience wants to buy something on this list, where do they go look at it, and how do they go about doing that?
The items that are for sale will be placed on the auction with Gov Deals.
With Gov Deals?
Gov Deals.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-168, the approval to declare as surplus certain properties owned by the city and directing disposal of the same. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-169, consideration to authorize an amendment to the City of Sandy Springs FY 2023 budget to transfer unobligated funds from Project TS-100 to Project TS-111, presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and council, good evening. This first of two agenda items I bring before you tonight request additional funds to be allocated from TS-100, our contingency account within T-SPLOST, to Project TS-111 in the amount of $1.5 million in the interest of awarding a construction contract, as well as the other services required to complete this project on construction, to include geotechnical inspections and utility relocations. We're proposing that amount of $1.5 million to one award the contract, now estimated at $3.2 million, $40,000 for geotechnical inspections, and an allowance of $50,000 for utility relocations, leaving a balance of some $209,000, thereabouts 5% of the project total, as an estimated contingency at this time.
You've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2023-169, consideration to authorize an amendment to the City Springs fiscal 2023 budget to transfer unobligated funds from Project TS-100 to Project TS-11.
Motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Mr. DiGiulio? Okay. Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
So we're actually going to do this project, Marty?
We're going to do this project.
Because
Coming up
we've
next.
been on this thing a long time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, the sooner the better.
Any other discussion?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly.
Do we know how much we have in TS 100?
With this transfer, we'll have an estimated balance of approximately $900,000 remaining in TS 100.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-169, authorizing an amendment to the City of Sandy Springs FY 2023 budget, transferring unobligated funds from project TS 100 to TS 111. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-170, consideration to approve a contract award to Vertical Earth, Inc. to construct the Spalding Drive at Pitts Road intersection project, that's TS 111, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract, presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and Council, thank you for your support with the budget amendment. With that amendment in place, I can recommend award of project TS 111 to Vertical Earth Construction in the amount of $3,214,056.84 to construct project TS 111 Spalding Drive at Pitts Road intersection. The work, as some of you are familiar with, will include adding turn lanes on both legs of this intersection to improve traffic operations in the area as well as safety. This project is estimated to take approximately 1 year, with estimated construction start in July of this year to complete this construction project. And that will be under the shadow, so to speak, of the bridge closure at Pitts Road. So timing's everything with this. We felt this was the right time to hopefully execute this project.
All right. You've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2023-170, approve the contract award to Vertical Earth to construct the Spalding Drive at Pitts Road intersection project TS 111, authorize city manager to execute the contract.
Motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2023-170, the contract award to Vertical Earth to construct the Spalding Drive at Pitts Road intersection. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
So when they estimate it's going to take a year, did that estimate for the construction time include the fact that Pitts Road is going to be closed for 6 months? Because could they maybe shorten that 1 year?
Yes, sir. They
did.
Closed. So they just estimate it in light of the understanding that the bridge would be closed at the time.
So it's still going to be a year?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's, as you recollect, and the others may not, but there's a significant amount of utility coordination as underground detention is installed within the roadway that will be somewhat of a challenge for schedule sake as we go through this.
I get it. It's a complicated project. I remember the plans. Everybody and his brothers got underground utilities running through there.
Yes,
so
sir.
It's just, I want to make sure we could take advantage of it if they hadn't before.
We'll
Thank
try
you.
where we can. So.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-170, approving a contract award to Vertical Earth to construct the Spalding Drive at Pitts Road intersection project. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-171. This is consideration of approval of an award of contract for Hammond Park Gymnastics Center operations contract to Jumpstart Gym LLC as it relates to request for proposal number 23-0070, presented by Rec and Parks Director Michael Perry.
Mr. Perry.
Sorry, guys, I'm like that bad penny. I just keep showing up. My apologies. The item before you tonight for your consideration to approve a contract with Jumpstart Gymnastics for operations of the Hammond Park Gymnastics Center. This item was solicited on March 23rd with bid opening on April 26th. Staff received one proposal for this contract, that being from Jumpstart Gymnastics. They're a local business with 12 years of experience in the Sandy Springs community. Jumpstart currently operates a gymnastics business at the Parkside Shopping Center just south of here. And that area will be soon be redeveloped, so they're looking for a home. They currently have more than 500 participants each season. The procurement was conducted using the performance price trade-off process. Proposals were evaluated on 4 criteria: capabilities and approaches, performance confidence, and cost price. Using the performance price trade-off procedure, The highest priced, technically acceptable proposal, judged to have a substantial confidence assessment, represents the best value for the city and receives the committee's award recommendation. Based on the assessment of the proposal, it's the committee's recommendation that the proposal submitted by Jumpstart Gymnastics represents the best value to the city. If awarded the contract, Jumpstart would pay the city $5,000 per month for rent as well as utility expenses.
All right, you've heard the report of the Director of Recreation and Parks. What's the desire of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of item 2023-171, approval of an award of contract for Hammond Park Gymnasium Center operations to Jumpstart Gyms LLC.
Motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Baumann, that we approve agenda item 2023-171, the award of the contract for Hammond Park Gymnastics Center operations to Jumpstart Gym. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. DiGiulio.
Michael, considering the problems we've had with the previous contractor there, have we done a thorough analysis of their financials to make sure we don't wind up in the same problems with this as the city that we did in the past with people who couldn't pay their bills?
Yes, sir. Part of this process included the financial statements that were reviewed by our finance department. And again, they have 12 years' experience in the community and twice the number of participants from the previous vendor. So we have a high level of confidence in that.
Okay, so Tony and her department went ahead and reviewed all this. And second of all, I noticed that this is for a fixed amount per month plus utility reimbursement.
Yes, sir.
Now, is that all the utilities for Hammond Park, or just the utilities for the gymnasium? And is it separable? Are those metered separately?
Excellent question. It's going to be just for that gymnastics facility.
And how do we figure that out? Or
Well,
is
we
that
think
metered
we figured it out, but we're going to make double sure. I mean, we allocated, or during the RFP process, we gave them the amount over the last year, which wound up being around $4,000 or $4,500 per month. But
just for the gym?
Just for the gym. Now, that also included, I'm going to round off at about $1,000 per month in water. I'm pretty sure that's water for the entire park, not just for the center. So we're going to circle the wagons back around a little bit and make sure we're treating the vendor correctly and not charging something that should not be their responsibility. So we're working. We've done some work, but we have more to do.
And when does this contract go into effect?
August 1st.
August 1st. Okay. And it's for 5 years?
Yes, sir.
10 years?
1 year. 1 year with 4 renewable options.
4
that renew automatically.
All right, thank you,
Mr. Baumann.
Michael, thank you. A couple of questions. First of all, in connection with the prior situation, there were some suggestions that the facilities maybe were not up to par for the intended use. Have you all addressed that, or have you assessed it, and do we feel comfortable that we are in a position to deliver a facility that meets with a standard that it should for this programming?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have, and we've worked with the facilities department. They've been excellent. They have contractors they've had out. There hasn't been a week that we haven't been trying to address those issues. The rodents involved are, I don't know if you've ever tried to keep squirrels out of a bird feeder, but they're ingenious little rascals, right? We have plugged holes and come back and plugged more holes, and they've eaten through concrete, and we've replugged holes. And I ask my staff every week, look, am I going to be able to tell these people with a straight face that we've done all we can do to get rid of the rodents? And they've not, in the last several weeks, they've not seen any. Does that have to say they're gone forever and never will return? No, sir. But we will be diligent in being out there every time we need to take care of it.
Is that our obligation under the agreement, or is
it is? Okay. It is. It's our facility, and we own it, and we're going to own it.
All right, well, and we're responsible for that.
That's right.
I have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
So I grew up and participated in sports and recreation programming, and really 2 different ways I did that. One was through the public schools that I attended, through organized athletics, and the second was through our Parks and Recreation system. And that meant park rec baseball, flag football, or probably tackle football, and a large basketball for sure. And really a lot of my life was around city parks and rec. And, my memory of that is that everybody was welcome and anybody could participate, which I know was our philosophy. So can you speak to the arrangement as it relates to, because this is a little different. I mean, we are a landlord in a sense, but there are a lot of commercial gymnastic programs, and I fully expect, and they should have completely market rate programming. But please address the access for members of our community that we would talk about underserved communities, kids that are in homes that don't have the means necessarily to, pay full market rates but want to participate in this kind of program, because that's sort of the program I attended growing up, and I think that's what we try to aspire to. So can you take a moment to address that?
Yes, sir. Fair enough. We've had this discussion with the potential vendor, and my understanding is nearly 20% of the participants in that program are at some level of financial assistance. Now, financial assistance doesn't mean it's free, and it doesn't mean it, and it also means that there are some volunteer opportunities that are obligated. If you can't afford it, then hey, they do that, and they do that in a very respectful, conscientious, and confidential way. But there's also times where, listen, we're going to need people on Friday night to put gift bags together, or we're going to need some parents to come here and make sure the kids are lined up in the bus, et cetera, et cetera. So 20% of the current participants in that program, and I've been assured that no kid's going to be turned away if they're willing to meet halfway.
But thank you, and I hope we can monitor and make that part of the defined success and the metrics here.
Absolutely.
And have an open and sort of a confidential or certainly a safe way for people to the extent they may feel excluded, or so that we have a fair way to evaluate and to make sure that we're achieving the recreation mission.
That's right.
And we're outsourcing what is a city thing, and we're getting a commercial rate, but as you can understand, it's a tricky conflict.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate the intent on the front end, but I'll certainly come back and ask in 6 months or a year when we kind of come. How are they doing on that front?
Councilman, it'll be part of our monthly matrix that we meet with that vendor. Okay, I'm going to look for an accounting every month to see where we go. That will be a line item. Yes, sir.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-171, the approval of an award of contract for Hammond Park Gymnastics Center operations to Jumpstart Gym. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved. Clerk, please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-172. This is consideration of approval of an award of contract for Sandy Springs Tennis Center operations to Grallamon Tennis Services as it relates to request for proposal number 23-063. Also presented by Michael Perry, Recreation and Parks Director.
Mr. Parks. Mr. Perry.
I'll go by that. Thank you.
I don't know. I got to rewire the brain tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all right. Hey, you're going to have to indulge me again, guys. We're reading through this script, but it's the only way I know to do it. So the item before you is presented for your consideration to award a contract to Grolleman Tennis Services for operations of the Sandy Springs Tennis Center. This item was solicited on March 8th, 2023, with an opening date of April 5th. 5 proposals were received. The proposal submitted by Impact Activities, and that's a company, was found to be non-responsive based on compliance with solicitation requirements. The 4 remaining proposals were received from Agape Tennis Academy, Grolleman Tennis Services, Premier Tennis Club, and Universal Tennis Management. The evaluation and selection process was conducted using the performance price trade-off procedure. I'll get this right before I'm through, I promise you, or I'll try. Proposals were evaluated on 3 criteria: capabilities and approaches, performance confidence, and finally cost price. Staff committees reviewed each proposal per the above criteria to arrive at a recommended contract provider. Using the performance price trade-off procedure, the highest price technically acceptable proposal, judged to have a substantial confidence assessment, represents the best value for the city and received the committee's award recommendation. Based on the assessment of the proposals, it is the committee's recommendation that the proposal submitted by Grolam Tennis Services represents the best value to the city. Over a 10-year period of the contract, Grolam Tennis Services will provide rent income and capital funding to the city in the amount of $2,411,024. In addition, Grolam Tennis will provide the Sandy Springs community with $1,716,000 in scholarships, scholarship values, free play, court donations to nonprofits, and school instructional programs.
All right, you've heard the report of the Director of Recreation and Parks. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve agenda item 2023-172, approval of award of contract for Sandy Springs Tennis Center operations, contract to Grosselman Tennis Services.
All right, we've got a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Dr. Kelly, that we approve agenda item 2023-172, the award of a contract for Sandy Springs Tennis operations contract to Grolam Tennis Services. Any discussion? Ms. Rochelle.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very excited about this. The number $1,716,000, that's pretty amazing. I know they go to our schools, to the elementary schools, and give free lessons. So I'm excited about that. And that you said that they're going to be putting some money into the facility, a little over $1 million, I think you said. And I'm excited about getting some much needed, and us working with them to get some much needed renovations and some capital improvements over there.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-172, award of a contract for the Sandy Springs Tennis Center operations to Grolam Tennis Services. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-173, consideration to approve the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 369 Johnson's Ferry Road. That's tax parcel ID number 17-007-1-001-080 through the use of eminent domain as it relates to Johnson's Ferry Road, Mount Vernon Highway Improvement Project, and that's project number TS-191. This is presented by City Attorney Dan Lee.
Mr. Lee.
Mayor, Council, this is a request that you authorize the use of eminent domain for the acquisition of 714 square feet of property in fee simple title. It's 369 Johnson Ferry Road and 414 feet of temporary construction easement. As you know, the process requires that the city hire an independent appraiser, real estate appraiser, which the contractor for the city hired an appraiser who appraised this property, both the fee simple take portion, the temporary construction portion, the cost of cure of $7,268, a total of $21,100. At the time, the same contractor hired a land acquisition company headed by Mr. Kendrick Jackson, who dealt with the property owner. As of May 8th, the property owner counteroffered through their lawyer a total of $106,000, 5 times the amount of the appraised value. Given the difference in the amounts and the notice from staff that this piece of property is intricate to the project, we ask you to authorize the use of eminent domain in hopes that we can further negotiate and try to resolve the matter. The difference is $80,000 in a cost to cure, which has not been supported by documentation from the property owner, but includes some effect in their idea of the septic system. And they're exploring now, since we've received this file on May 18th, to having connected to the Fulton County sewer system, so hopefully some of that can be resolved. But that is the difference in $80,000 in cost to cure, which includes the impact of septic tank and some loss of landscaping that the city has not agreed to.
All right, you've heard the report of the city attorney. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul,
Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve agenda item 2023-173 for the to approve the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 369 Johnson Ferry Road, tax parcel number 17-0071-001-008-0 through the use of eminent domain as it relates to the Johnson Ferry Road, Mount Vernon Highway Improvement Project, project number 191.
Have a motion by Ms. Mueller. Is there a second? It's been motioned by Ms. Mueller, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2023-173, the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 369 Johnson Ferry Road through the use of eminent domain. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Mueller.
Dan, does did the city's original estimate include the disruption to the septic tank?
It did. It does not. It did not, and it still does not. What we go by is what the engineers and the contractors convey to us. The appraiser and none of the above have indicated that the septic tank would be impacted by this. And of course, subs have been wrong before, so we've asked the property owner via their lawyer to check that and even see what it would cost to connect to the Fulton County sewer, which is not very far away from the property, and hopefully we can get to some conclusive decision about that.
Is it correct we're only asking for 714 square feet?
714.21 square feet. This is one of the properties along there, and there are 4 or 5 residential properties along that stretch that are close proximity to the current road. So while 714 feet may not seem like a lot, it changes that close proximity to be even closer. So it is more impactful than just the amount that is being taken. And we've expressed some concern in the past about some of our appraisals not giving credibility to the change in the proximity to the roadway, which is a recognized diminution in the value of the property.
Well, even with eminent domain, negotiations are still possible, correct?
Yes, sir, we believe that there is some ground to be covered, especially if we can get to some decision that everybody can agree to involving the sewer system.
But the importance of eminent domain is it transfers the title to the city so that it doesn't hold the project up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Paulson.
So point of clarification, this whole discussion about septic versus sewer, number one, can this be resolved in the next 30 days? You got any indication that facts can come back that will clarify this in the next 30 days? And as a result, because of this uncertainty, is there a reason to hold off for 30 days, or do we just keep going with this thing, and then as it unfolds, we make decisions at that point in time?
The issue is now where we sit, do we delay the project? And we bring it to you tonight asking for the authority to use eminent domain so that we do not delay the project. Even if we were to file for the eminent domain, the discussion about the value will have to go on. There is no doubt that the project is going to happen. I mean, we've acquired all the properties along the way, and there are very few left to acquire, so that the project will go forward. And this vote tonight, if you authorize the use of eminent domain, will be your declaration that the project will go forward. It will not affect the discussion about the pricing of it. That's going to go on no matter what.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-173, the approval of the appropriation of certain property rights and interests located at 369 Johnson Ferry Road through the use of eminent domain. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item 2023-174. This is consideration to authorize the city manager to negotiate a letter of intent with the master developer for City Springs Phase 2. Presented by City Manager Eden Freeman.
Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This evening, we are pleased to present for your consideration a source evaluation memorandum with a recommendation for a preferred development partner for the development of city-owned parcels adjacent to City Springs within the City Springs district. On the screen in front of you is a copy of the source evaluation memorandum, which will be published online momentarily. On December 20th, 2022, Mayor and Council adopted the City Springs Master Plan, which was an update to our original 2012 City Center Master Plan. The city then issued a request for qualifications as the first phase of a two-phase process to solicit and select a master developer. The first phase of the solicitation, Phase 1, was issued on November 16th, 2022, with responses due on December 13th, 2022. Responses to both phases of the solicitation were evaluated by individuals who were selected by myself using the criteria set forth in Section 4 of the RFQ and Section 4 of the RFP. The members of the evaluation committee were myself, Chris Burnett with South State Bank, Dan Lee, the city attorney, Richard Munger with Toro Development, David Rubenstein with Civilis, and Kristen Smith, assistant city manager. In addition, we had a group of advisors who assisted the evaluation committee who possessed specific expertise in areas that were critical to the success of the project. Those individuals were Mayor Paul, Tony Carlisle, our Chief Financial Officer, Haddow and Company, Real Estate Consultants, and Forrest Hibbard, Parking Consultant. The city received responses from the following five firms. First, the Atlantic Companies, and these are presented in alphabetical order. Second, Mid-City Real Estate Partners, partnered with ASD SKI Architecture. Mill Creek Residential Trust with Westbridge, Regent Partners with Morris and Fellows, and Roca Point Partners with the Georgetown Company. The evaluation committee members evaluated each response, and all five were moved forward at the recommendation of the committee and council's approval in a January 18th, 2023 special called meeting to participate in Phase 2, the RFP process. The RFP was issued on January 24th, 2023, and proposals were due April 28th, 2023. Section 4 of the RFP identified a series of specific criteria that the city would base our evaluation of the proposals that were received. First, does the proposed development align with the goal, visions, and intent described in the City Springs Master Plan? The city desired proposals that included owner-occupied housing as dictated by market demand. Did the offeror propose owner-occupied units? What percentage of proposed residential units are owner-occupied? Does the offeror propose a true mix of uses on the site? Did the offeror include a proposal for a boutique hotel? If not, have they allocated appropriate space for a future hotel, including an allocation for needed parking? How quickly can the offeror complete the development? Is the offeror capable of following through with the financial and other obligations related to this project? Is the offeror capable of leasing spaces to boutique, local restaurants, and retail to enhance the City Springs district as a unique destination? Do the master developer and project team members have the institutional depth to ensure project completion of construction and success should the team members of the team exit the project? And finally, is the city being offered a market-based value for the land given the unique nature of the project? On April 28th, proposals were received from the following three project teams: Mid-City Real Estate Partners with ASD SKY and Atlantic Residential, Regent Partners and Morris and Fellows, and Roca Point Partners with the Georgetown Company. The evaluation committee began its review of proposals the week of May 1st. In conjunction with this evaluation, the Phase 2 offerers were invited by letters dated May 10th to meet individually with the evaluation committee for the purpose of presenting their team and their proposed approach. The letter included specific items to be addressed by each offerer during the evaluation committee meeting. A subsequent letter was sent on May 12th requesting that the offerers be prepared to provide additional information that was included in those letters in their interviews. On May 16th, the Evaluation Committee conducted a formal interview with Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows. On May 17th, the Evaluation Committee conducted a formal interview with Mid-City and their partners. On May 22nd, the Evaluation Committee conducted a formal interview with Roca Point. On May 22nd, the Evaluation Committee sent a follow-up letter to all Phase 2 offerers requesting additional information. The Evaluation Committee then completed the evaluation and formed a consensus regarding the proposal it believed represents the best interest of the city. The Evaluation Committee has determined that the proposal presented by Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows is in the best interest of the city, and subject to final review and reference checks, made a tentative decision to recommend award. Below you see a list of the major factors that were the basis of the selection. Their proposed development aligns with the goals, the vision, and the intent described in the City Springs Master Plan. The proposed development would further the vision to make City Springs a vibrant, walkable district for Sandy Springs residents and visitors, offering an array of food and beverage options, unique shopping, fine art and entertainment, outdoor spaces, and housing. The proposed development includes options for owner-occupied housing. The proposed development includes a true mix of uses. Both Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows have a strong track record of creating dynamic mixed-use projects and recent public-private partnership development experience. For example, Eastern Wharf in Savannah and Alpharetta City Center. Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows bring a unique approach to the retail components of the project. Morrison Fellows has served as the key retail partner on several successful mixed-use projects, including Alpharetta City Center and downtown Woodstock, with unique and local retailers, and would directly oversee the retail components of the project. Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows have explored specific options for a boutique hotel as a component of the project. The proposed development schedule provided by Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows anticipates completion at the end of calendar year 2026. While all proposals attempted to assign a value for the land, the value for the land will be determined once the final development program is approved by council. This development program is subject to future negotiation. Regent Partners provided the city with current financial statements for its management company as required. Our real estate advisor, Haddow & Company, reviewed the financial proposals and found that the public components that were envisioned having the city incurring development costs for certain infrastructure, which could include items such as parking spaces, green space, and public streets. The private component included a valuation approach and associated incentive requests that was a function of density, scale, and use. Greater density equated to more value attributed to the private development. Increased amounts of residential development were directly correlated to an incremental increase in land value. Hotel and office components of the development were request of the city's RFP, although both uses are difficult to finance given the current economic conditions. However, these uses would enhance the vibrancy of City Springs, and the ultimate value of the private development will be a function of the negotiation. Subject to further program refinement and negotiations, the Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows proposal was deemed to be an acceptable financial approach to begin negotiations. While the proposed incentive request and public components of the development are larger than what the city would have anticipated providing, both are subject to negotiations. The city and the preferred development partner will work collaboratively over the next 90 to 120 days to conceive a mutually acceptable development plan and financial terms. Subsequent to making a tentative decision on a recommendation for award, the Evaluation Committee requested 3 references from Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows. All references were contacted and were highly complimentary of both firms and their working relationships with each municipality. For all of the reasons described above, the Evaluation Committee unanimously recommends that Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows be selected as the city's proposed City Springs Phase 2 preferred development partner. City Council authorized the city manager to develop and enter into a letter of intent with Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows to finalize the project and negotiate any concessions for the project. City Council authorized the city manager to enter into negotiations with Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows for a development agreement related to the private components of the project. City Council authorized the city manager to enter into negotiations with an entity to provide program management services for any public components of the project, if applicable. And City Council authorized the city manager to begin a public engagement process with Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows. While the Evaluation Committee unanimously recommends Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows as the preferred development partner, the city retains the right to re-engage the two other qualified firms for additional discussions should negotiations with Regent Partners and Morrison Fellows not result in a finalized development agreement. Also included in your materials this evening is a resolution that Caroline will pull up. Council's action tonight would be to adopt the resolution if you so desire, the source evaluation memo being attached to that to provide additional documentation of the recommendation. We will also be publishing copies of all three proposals that were submitted. And the reason that we're taking the step to do this after council takes action is because this is, at its very core, a real estate transaction. It must be kept confidential until such time that council votes in a public setting and authorizes us to release this information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
You've heard the report of the city manager. What is the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of Agenda Item 2023-174, authorize the city manager to negotiate a letter of intent with a master developer for the City Springs Phase 2 project.
Motion by Mr. Paulson. Do I hear a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve Agenda Item 2023-174, authorizing the city manager to negotiate a letter of intent with a master developer for City Springs Phase 2. Any discussion? Mr. Paulson.
So, as I said earlier when we had some of these public comments, this is not the end of this. This is the beginning of this deal. This is the beginning of this development. There's more to come. There's 3 proposals going to get published. Those are not fixed in stone. There's a lot that needs to be talked about here, but the idea was to try to pick somebody that everybody felt, or the staff at least, and the reviewers had a sense of consistent with the direction we believe this whole development south of City Hall should take. So my only point is, I think it's important. Let's go to the next step. Let's work with these folks, and let's just see what we can come up with in terms of putting a letter of intent together and then begin the process of fleshing out the details of this project.
Mr. Baumann.
To piggyback on John's comments, first I want to ask, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Dan, it looked like you were leaning in. I have received some questions about the process, so can you just briefly explain why this process is a little bit different and materials weren't published, for example, on Friday? And Eden, I think, did a good job, but if you wanted to add something, I want to offer you that opportunity. And then I have a follow-up question.
Just maybe a sentence of clarity for the council as a reminder and for the general public. The mayor council, via the staff, took advantage of the really fine procurement processes here to pick a qualified vendor to negotiate developing what mayor council decides is in the best interest of the citizens of Sandy Springs to do with property owned by the citizens of Sandy Springs. That part is what you're voting on right now. What remains is the conclusion of the negotiation for the sale of city-owned property, which is something that it must be kept for the benefit of the deal and the deal that the citizens of Sandy Springs need, very confidential. And so the financial discussions with all the vendors, all the proposers, will necessarily have to be kept confidential. What is available, because of the transparency that the mayor council require, that the city manager and the staff have prepared, is the exposure of the designs that were proposed, not the negotiation or the discussions about costing and the attempt to propose purchase prices. That must be kept until a deal is struck.
Yeah, so integral to what we ultimately negotiate with, first of all, this council, to be very clear, as Councilman Paulson, is not approving the sort of conceptual ideas that were brought. Is that correct? All right. And first of all, thank you, by the way, Eden, Dan, Chris Burnett, Rusty, everybody that was involved. I know a lot of time was spent on that. That it's not really visible, but we're aware of that, and so thank you. But so, are the conceptual designs included in all three of the proposals about to be released?
Yes.
All right. So we really do have to caution that the imagination is still open, and the final say on that is this body in our representation of the citizens of Sandy Springs, and how each of us define highest and best use still is a discussion to be had. And to John, your point, to your point, people are going to see these things for the first time. These were concepts, okay? They're a great starting point. They were responsive to the request, but comments raised tonight, others that we have or will receive, and the creativity that is available to the process and to all of us is still up for grabs. I mean, still up for consideration, negotiation. Maybe something comes in, maybe something comes out, and cannot emphasize enough that when people look at those drawings or renderings or concepts, that's all they are. Present some really cool ideas, I would agree, but and we just need to really be very cautious about that because we get a lot of chance to discuss and hear from the public on that. So I just wanted to...
Let me add some clarification.
Thank you.
Since I was an observer of the process in my role as an advisor, in looking at all three proposals, none of them were exactly what we were looking for. What we were looking for, as much as anything, was who can we work with? Who has a vision here that we can work together to try and figure out where we go from here? There's a lot of stuff in all of these proposals that they're requesting the city to do certain things, and as you would expect in any negotiation, they throw everything in, including the kitchen sink, many of which that I don't think this council, or not many, some of which I don't think this council will go along with, some of which we even doubt we can do. So that's the reason we have negotiations. What we were looking for, not so much, we were looking at their concept. We were looking at their vision for the space. But more importantly, we were looking at a couple of things. What have they done previously that fits into our environment, that we think that they can bring to the table that will help us get where we want to go, number one. Secondly, do they have the wherewithal to do this? And the financial ability to do that is a very important part of the consideration. But above all is what kind of partner do we think they will be as we work together to get to where we all think we should go. But we got a lot of work to do because none of the three proposals were dead on about what we want and what we believe is important. And the proposers were in the dark because we couldn't, other than what we could publish for them, there was no opportunity to have a conversation and say, well, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? Well, in our procurement processes, we have to have a firewall that doesn't happen. So they were guessing based on what we put into the RFP, and we realized even during the RFP process, we weren't clear enough to give them the flexibility that they should have to bring their ideas to us. So we offered an addendum to that document to say, hey, think a little bit more about, if this weren't the case, what would you do, and so on. So they were kind of guessing about what we were looking for. Now there's an opportunity to sit down and really have a detailed discussion and looking at their proposal, and we're candidly distance apart on some of these things going into the negotiations. Hence the reason why we want to retain the opportunity to go back and talk to somebody else. If we're not able to bridge some of the gaps that I think staff and I and council believe exist, if we can't bridge those, then we're going to have to figure some other partner to do some of these things. So we're going to start down this road. We'll find out how well it goes. We may continue all the way to completion. If we can't find a deal that we think works in the best interest of everybody in this community, and gives us the kind of downtown environment that I think we all aspire to have, then we'll go looking somewhere else to find a partner. So what they're saying is it truly is a first step, but it's a monumental step. We now have a path forward. We've got a timeline that we know we can that we'll work to complete. We've got some other partners that we've got to bring to the table and have some conversations with who've been sitting waiting for us to make some other decisions. For example, the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust. We've made a lot of twists and turns in that relationship over the last few years, and this is another twist and turn in that relationship. So we've got to sit down with them and have a conversation about this. But it was one of the major driving factors was if we're going to do the Georgia Holocaust and visit Sandy Springs and the police precinct on one parcel, and then 3 or 4 other parcels going to have a different contractor and developer, what's the conflicts that are going to result in that? What kind of dislocation is that going to cause to the people who live in the neighborhood, having 2 sets of projects going on simultaneously? So I think the council wisely has at least recommended, we haven't negotiated that detail either yet, but the council has wisely recommended that we do this as one whole project. So I'll close, not burning more oxygen on this one, just by saying, in my mind, we've got several significant bridges to build and gaps to fill before we get to a final agreement on what is going to go across the street. Mr. DiGiulio.
I've got a question here for Eden. Obviously, we have got a lot of public concern and a public desire to put input in this, as has been demonstrated by our guests here tonight. How do you envision the public input process to go from here so that everybody in Sandy Springs who wants to be involved, especially our close-by neighbors, can be involved with the input into the decision-making process how do you envision this? What do you have planned to go ahead and facilitate this?
We'll be fleshing that out in our conversations with the preferred development partner, but at a minimum, I anticipate a series of online surveys where folks can share their opinions, as well as a series of public information open houses. We've used that model very successfully in years past, and hearing that input, we did the step of doing that during the City Springs Master Plan update, so we would use that as a building block. But there will be significant opportunity for folks to give their feedback on it.
When do you anticipate that we would start that process?
I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but a lot of it, I haven't even been able to have a conversation with the preferred development partner yet to try to come up with a schedule. So
we can't have any conversations until after the vote.
Does our audience realize that you cannot have discussions before this step is taken? This step, because everything up to this point has to be confidential by Georgia law. Okay, so anyway, you'll do something and publish something within the next couple of weeks about how we're going to handle this.
And Mayor, as a quick reminder, online, and I made the mistake of asking where something was already online, but there's a lot of information online about public input from that City Center Master Plan process.
And there's a lot of paperwork that's being transferred to the website right now. Because these were thick binders that we had, so there's a lot of detail on there. And keep in mind also, this is a little bit different than we built this facility. There is, other than the Commission on the Holocaust offices and the Anne Frank exhibit, the Visit Sandy Springs offices and the police precinct, there are no publicly owned, publicly managed aspects to that project across the street. Unlike this, where we have all this around us, which is city-owned property. But that doesn't mean that one of the reasons why we're doing it this way is it does give the city more control. It doesn't give us absolute control, but it gives us more control than if a private developer came in and bought the property and decided to do what they wanted to do with theirs. So This is a process that the council has, again, wisely, I believe, undertaken to buy parcels of land where we control the development to the fullest extent that we can, and get more of what the community wants. No project's going to give us everything we want, but we do have a little bit more opportunity. The negotiations with the developer will give us a lot more control, not total control, than it would be if a developer came in and just bought land and started, came in for zoning or whatever. Then once they get the zoning, they get to do the planning and build whatever they want to do. So council, to control the environment in the downtown area, has taken this process to procure land and then help manage the development so that the community does have a lot more input and a lot more conversation. But in the end, it will be a private development with a lot of input from us and you, but it will be a private development. There will be only those public elements, and so it's a little bit different than this project that we're sitting in right now. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2023-174, authorizing the city manager to negotiate a letter of intent with a master developer for City Springs Phase 2. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to city council reports, and mayor reports. I don't have much to talk about tonight. We are, I will say, have had some conversations. Many of you know about we have what we call the Citizens Police Academy, where citizens get to work and learn a lot more about our police department. We have the Fire Corps, same sort of thing, and one of the things that we are considering and looking at, council has provided some input, but we still got a lot of work to do, is doing the same thing for the city organization and something approximating the Sandy Springs, right now it's an operating title, Sandy Springs Leadership Academy, where people can learn more about what goes on in this building, what goes on in the various departments, how we work together, how they interrelate. There will be a real leadership component because one of the things, there's a lot of difference between being a manager and a leader, and so we want to be able to kind of add some of that. We're working on the curriculum. We'll have more to talk about a little bit later, probably anticipating a fall start if council buys into to where we're going, and I think it's very important that it's part of the transparency thing that we're talking about, is that people need to know what goes on in these buildings, how each of these people over here and back there and up there work together, and what our various roles and responsibilities are. So I look at it as a very positive thing to help educate our community about the city, the community at large, and really learn about in depth, just like the police department and the fire department. We're taking their model and applying it to the city governmental operations and other aspects of the community. So you'll be hearing a little bit more about that as we kind of refine that process. Anybody else? Mr. DiGiulio and then Mr. Bauman.
Mayor, while we were coming in here, we heard some reports about some microbursts in the southern part of the city, that trees had damaged homes and people, et cetera. Do we have any word on what's happened and to what extent? I notice Chief Sanders is not here anymore. I would assume that he's been called out because of this. But do the police know anything about this? Do we have any information on what's happened to our people?
I'll certainly have Deputy Chief Chandler chime in, but as it stands right now, we seem to have a number of power outages down in the High Point area. We've had our signal crews out installing and getting generators activated so that the signals can continue to operate. Right now, we don't have any reports of any injuries. We do have reports of some damage on private property. There's also some power lines down. One of the most recent ones that I've received is a tree down on Windsor Parkway near High Point Road, and Georgia Power is on site repairing those power lines. We did hear that it was a confirmed microburst. There were 70-mile-per-hour winds reported at Peachtree DeKalb Airport. And Deputy Chief Chandler, if you've got anything to add.
Mr. Bauman.
A couple items. First, work at the North Side Drive, Riverview, Old Powers Ferry project started. It's a big project on the southern end of the city. Tonight, with the weather, there's also a Braves game. Be interested if we hear any feedback. But I do want to thank Marty, Len, Eden, and anybody else. We were responding early on to a lot of questions and requests, and I know that you all personally, on at least one and maybe multiple occasions, drove out there. And I just really sincerely thank you, and the residents appreciate it, and I'm hearing from them. So that's the first thing. So thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on that. Be interested to hear what happens tonight with the first Braves game.
Yeah.
The second thing, I want to correct something that one of the speakers during general public comment made earlier. At our special meeting last week, we did not take a budget action. We approved something that we've already budgeted for, that we've planned for many, many years in public fully, that we've borrowed for it in public. So we approved the GMP, I think, for the new police headquarters and court complex.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of that. And I think I wanted to correct the record on that. That was not a budget item. And so with what we did. And then lastly, this being the 79th anniversary, I think, of D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
It is also, on a personal note, I won't say how many years, but my mother's birthday. And I had the great joy of taking her to lunch in Sandy Springs today over at the Mercedes development at a nice restaurant, Yalda. And there's some other good restaurants over there. And there's a nice, I think this may be the first time I've been there for lunch, but I've been there many times for dinner. And there's a really nice vibe going on over there. People sort of sitting out on the lawn, much like what we want. And so I know my mom is not watching this, but I may show her the tape. But every birthday is a good birthday. So to my mom, I want to wish her a very happy birthday.
All right. Any others?
Just want to follow on to Councilman Bauman. The Food That Rocks is Thursday. So come on out and eat and have fun.
I tell you what, our concerts have been great. I had to miss Sunday night because of a family graduation from high school. But this year's concert series have been unbelievably well attended. People are having a great time. The Thursday night ones have been, they're new. Crowds are a little smaller, but don't forget about we're having fun out here on Thursday nights now too as well. So this is Fun City. Come on out and join. Anybody else? Any staff reports?
No.
All right. We need an executive session for real estate and litigation.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move that we suspend regular order, move into executive session for the purposes of real estate and litigation.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we suspend regular order and move into executive session. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on going into executive session. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're in executive session. As is our normal process, we will conduct no further business this evening. We will go into executive session, return here, return to regular order, and immediately adjourn. So thank you all for coming.